My name is Larry Beasley. I'm a member of the board of TransLink. My background is that I'm a city planner. I'm a professor of planning at the University of British Columbia. I have my own planning consultancy that works all over the world. And I write books about cities, my most recent book being Vancouverism.
Can you actually just tell us about the book you've written and where you can find it?
Yeah, it's called Vancouverism. It's published by UBC Press and available through UBC Press and Amazon. And what I do is I cover the history of the transformation of Vancouver between Expo 86, that very important moment in our city and our culture, and the 2010 Olympics. In that period, this city transformed from a very traditional North American city, car-oriented, very much homogenized in its culture, to a real trendsetter in the world, a world city. And so I go through, from the beginning to the end, how we did that, because I was at the center of the action of that in Vancouver in a leadership role. And I wanted to tell the inside story of what was going on and what we were trying to do.
Fantastic. What does a TransLink board member do?
The board is the group that oversees and governs the day-to-day activities of TransLink, makes the key policy decisions, and in the case of TransLink also works and liaises with the Mayor's Council, because the final decisions on our transportation system are actually in this region made by the Mayor's Council of Greater Vancouver. So the Mayor's Council, the board work together to determine transit policy, major roads policy, cycling policy, walking policies, and to look forward to the changing nature of mobility, to have a 5-year plan, to have a 30-year plan, and then to manage the system so that we deliver an excellent, enjoyable transportation experience for our citizens.
You can tell me why you were interested in joining the board.
Well, my background is in city planning, and through the years I realized that land use and transportation fit together in a seamless web in a city. When you think about a city, when you're managing a city, when you're designing cities. And so the opportunity to be able to influence the financing and the policies of how we move around was just too exciting to pass up. It happens that if you can shape the city from both directions, land use and transportation, together, you have an opportunity to do more than what would happen by accident. And so I wanted to be a part of that. I also found it a chance to learn more about the transportation side, because my primary functionality, as the chief planner, former chief planner of Vancouver, was to be managing how the land use and community infrastructure came together. So it was very enjoyable for me. It has been very enjoyable for me to then get involved now in the specifics of transportation as the balance to that land use inquiry.
How does public transit factor into Vancouverism? Well,
Vancouverism is a story of a time in this one city where we went beyond the old traditional ideas of cities with everything separated, all the uses separated and spread out over the landscape in a kind of an endless suburbia, where we started to think about places, where we started to think about alternative ways to move around. We started to think about social and cultural issues. We started thinking about the experience of the city. And we invented many, many new ideas for both how all of that comes together and how you manage that. As we were living that discovery, it became more and more evident to me just how important the dimensions of transportation are. For example, if you don't have a good transit system, you really can't cluster people so easily. If you don't cluster people, you don't have a very good transit system. And so you find that you have to choreograph both of these things together in order for that. in order to get to an optimal city. We know the city of the future is going to be one that has us closer together, but living in much more enjoyable environments, but taking our pressure off of the green edges and the natural environment. And in order to do that, we need to build an alternative to the transportation, what I would say the majority transportation options of the past, which was primarily the automobile. The city of the future is not anti-automobile. There will always be a place for personal mobility. But we want to create cities where more people would prefer to travel by public transit, but even more importantly, more people would prefer to travel by alternative modes, such as walking and cycling and the new modes that we're starting to see, because their trips are shorter. They have fewer trips. They spend less time in transportation and more time in the other things that matter in their lives, with their families, with their children, with their work. And so it's important to always have a proactive transportation policy framework developing all the time, at the cutting edge of ideas, so that you can achieve the land use side that you also want to achieve and the environmental side that you want to achieve. Cities are complex, interrelated. You can't take one component out or another component out. It starts to fall apart. So you have to deal with everything comprehensively.
Right. What would you like people to think of while we're going through this process of asking the public what they want their transportation choices to be in 30 years?
Well, I think there's two things that we want to be very thoughtful about. Number one is that we are going to see new technological inventions about personal mobility. For example, driverless cars. We're going to see that coming into our cities, not in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, but certainly in the next 15, 20, or 25 years. Secondly, we're going to see an amazing diversity of new mobility. I was just in Paris. The biggest thing you now see on the streets of Paris are the little electric scooters that we're now talking about here. I was in Paris 6 months ago, and I didn't see any of them. This particular trip, I probably saw 7,000 or 8,000 of them. That's just one of the amazing array of new mobility that are going to come into the equation. So I think it's important that people in this region start to think about these new technologies, very disruptive to our traditional idea of transportation, but also very opportunistic for a different kind of more effective city, and how they fit together. What is the legal framework? What is the social framework? What is the equity dimensions? All of those things. How do we allocate land? In my book, I say that there's a possibility that we could reallocate maybe as much as half of our street space to alternatives to the private car. We could reclaim huge swaths of the public landscape of a city to be doing wonderful things that have us face to face, enjoying one another, enjoying the things of life, enjoying our families, rather than in the isolation of a car trying to work through a traffic jam. So that's the one part of it. The other part of it has to do with everyone starting to embrace the different ways that we will live in the future. Sharing economy is coming in a big way, and we have to add that in. The idea of multiple living as compared to each individual, separate home is coming in, and we have to figure out how to make that a wonderful experience for people. In some parts of the world, that's what happens if you're not the winner in life. We want to make multiple living, sharing, what happens if you are really successful in life. We want to make it a preferred choice. And those all go toward the third factor, which we really need to come to grips with in this next transportation plan, which is our impact on the natural environment. We are demolishing the natural environment, and it's now turning back on us and starting to really affect us. And we have to find a new accord between human beings and nature. And transportation policy is at the heart of how we as human beings will do that. And so as we develop this new 50-year vision of transportation for Greater Vancouver, we need to embrace the new technologies, we need to embrace the new ways to live, and we need to embrace a much more responsible relationship with our natural setting.
Okay, you should fill out the survey.
Transport 2050 is going to change the way you live. It's going to change the city, it's going to change the region, but it is going to change the way you and your family live. And so it's important that every citizen contribute to the decisions we're going to make about that. What do people want? How much do they want to live together, closer together? How much are they interested in the alternative technologies? What do they need in order to not only move around effectively and efficiently, but to enjoy the city as they move around? Those are the kind of issues that will not be sensitively handled in terms of public policy unless we have tens of thousands of people telling us their views. A policy framework like this can be made by technocrats, and almost always they make a mistake. But a policy framework that has technocrats working together with all kinds of people through surveys, through meetings, through contributions on the social network, and et cetera, those kind of policy frameworks are always sensitive to human needs and human conditions. Every single person who fills out a form is going to make sure that Transport 2050 in this region is very suitable to the needs of our people, not just to the needs of corporate Vancouver or government Vancouver, but to the needs of individual citizens, your children. And I think that's what matters. And that's why filling out this form is just not bureaucracy. You're going to change the city.